Good afternoon. I'm Leon Davis, and this is Altitude Adjustment. Let me start this session off by sending my best wishes to the friends and family of those affected in the shooting at the Santa Fe High School near Houston, Texas. Also, my best to the emergency responders that were there to help those people in need.
Welcome to Altitude Adjustment.
Okay, a little quick on the trigger there. This is try a little different opening, make it a little streamlined and faster. And I had hoped to have a more lighthearted show. I look back over my shows and I'm thinking some of them can be seem a little I don't want to say dark, but not comedic in value. And probably this one isn't going to be either. But after I had put together the open and things that I wanted to talk about on Wednesday, and then on Friday, what happened in Santa Fe happened. And so, though the show wasn't about what happened there, it's what happened afterwards that the show is designed to address. So let me go back to my original open. On Wednesday, I got out of the house, decided to have an opportunity to enjoy an evening out, and the weather was great. And I went to this restaurant. Now, the restaurant is not known for its quality of meat. It's not a high dollar steakhouse, but they offered prime rib. Now, I worked in the restaurant business for 16 years, and I managed a steakhouse for about 4 or 5 of those, and I ate steak twice a day, or beef products twice a day for 5 years, and I became quite adept at identifying quality of meat, understanding steak, and what's a good steak and what's not. And prime rib is one of the best. It is the best quality meat that you're going to, and it's really difficult to destroy prime rib. And there's really only one way to do that, and that is overcook it. Prime rib is so tender that you can basically cut it with a fork. And when you overcook the meat, it becomes tough and stringy, and it requires a knife to cut, and it takes a while to chew. So you have to be conscious of that. And the process that we used to cook our prime rib, you put it in the oven, but you have to watch it for so long. You cook it by weight, and then you make sure you put it in a place where it's not going to cook up once you remove it from the oven, because you don't want that roast to overcook, because it does destroy the quality of meat. And now some people may see that when I say that, they may see me as being snobbish about meat, but prime rib is to me one of those meats that you enjoy. Prime rib, it's not just something to eat and feel full. It is a quality meat, and you enjoy it. I have a tendency, because of what I've learned, or the time that I spend in the steakhouse, I tend to have my meat medium rare. And there are a lot of people that just don't like medium rare meat. And it's mostly because of either the way it looks. Well, I'm going to say, but mostly because of the way it looks. They don't like the idea of raw meat or raw looking meat. But what you don't understand is that when you cook a steak past medium, I would never encourage anyone to cook a steak past medium. But when you cook a steak past medium, you've basically turned it into shoe leather. You've taken all of the nutrition out of it, any nutritional value that's in it, and there are people who will argue that. But any nutritional value that's in the steak, once you've cooked it medium well, it's done. There's no nutritional value. And then again, like I said, you might as well just take off your shoe and chew on that. It becomes tough. And so I encourage people to try a medium rare steak. Try a medium steak. Close your eyes if you have to. Just try the steak and you'll notice a difference. So I had the ordered the prime rib. What had happened was I had ordered something else and had walked past this table on my way to pay for my meal, and I saw the prime rib, and it looked like it was a medium rare. And it may just have been the lights. It may have been maybe just that piece of meat that he got. But I went back. I said, I'd like to change mine. I want the prime rib. So the prime rib came out, and it was medium well. And I debated for a second. But I took it back. I said, is there any way you've got a medium rare back there? And they brought me out another piece of medium well steak. So before leaving the restaurant, I considered going back up there and explaining why you don't overcook prime rib, why it's important that roast be medium rare. Because prime rib is a roast that you can actually cook up with au jus sauce. So if you pour hot au jus sauce over prime rib, it will actually cook up. It will become doner. So you don't want to overcook the roast in the oven or before you serve it. It's better to undercook the roast than overcook it, because you can always cook it up, but you can never cook it down. But my concern was, and I thought about it, if you don't like steak, if you don't like prime rib, if you don't eat medium rare meat, you're probably not going to understand why someone would get so caught up or so interested in making sure that meat comes out medium rare. And I thought, so I could go back up, I could explain my point, I could make my case, but I didn't feel like anyone that could serve a piece of meat medium well and not say to the person, look, I'm sorry, we don't have any medium rare pieces of meat. This is the best that this meat gets. I'll be more than happy to give you your money back or give you something else or give you store credit or something, recognizing that the quality of that meat changes with the temperature. So if they didn't show that in the process of cutting and serving that meat, what is the likelihood that I'm going to say something that's going to resonate? Because they felt comfortable enough serving that steak like that. I could not do it. I mean, if someone asked me for a medium well, I'd hold my nose and serve them medium well, because the customer has the right to eat that steak the way they do. So that made me think. I named the episode Catch-22. And Catch-22, if you didn't see the movie, it was an excellent movie. And it was about a Navy bomb or a bomber in World War II who wanted to get out of flying bombing missions. And so there was a problem. There was a Catch-22. And I'll share this with you real quick.
Catch-22. Anyone who wants to get out of combat isn't really crazy, so I can't ground him. Okay, let me see if I got this straight. In order to be grounded, I've got to be crazy. And I must be crazy to keep flying. But if I ask to be grounded, that means I'm not crazy anymore and I have to keep flying. You've got it. That's Catch-22.
Okay. So a Catch-22 is just simply a situation where there's circular logic. And the circular logic keeps you from getting to a solution. It keeps you from getting to a place where something can get done. And with this shooting on Friday, this killing of the students on Friday, we started back into that same old conversation. It was hard for me to once again say that I send my best wishes, and we continue to do the exact same thing and make not minimal progress, absolutely no progress. Nothing has changed. No legislation, no minds have changed. There's just an increase in frustration because we're not getting anything done. And most of the solutions, almost all of the solutions that I have heard of things that they want to interact from the NRA, from anti-gun opponents, have all been long-term. They're all going to take effect later. So there was, and I didn't get the clip, but there was a interview between Alisyn Camerota and Dana Loesch, and it kind of typified what's happening around the gun debate and some of the laws that we're trying to implement in our country right now. So I'll use that as part of the discussion. So they had the discussion, and they both put forth ideas, but they were both yelling at each other. And I don't want to say yelling as in angrily yelling, but they were both trying to overtalk each other. They were both trying to get their point in, and the other person was supposed to listen. So neither one of them was listening to the other person. They both put forth an idea that doesn't solve the problem immediately, but is eventually going to solve the problem. And we've got people dying, and we don't have any solutions that are going to stop the dying today. That means eliminate having another school shooting on Monday morning when school starts. And then at the end of the conversation, both of them say, oh, well, they gave the fake platitudes, and it appears fake platitudes because they say, well, Camerota says, we're glad to have you on for the discussion. And Loesch says, I'm glad you had me on, and I'm glad we've had this conversation and it's productive. No answers came out of it. No potential directions came out of it. Nothing you could classify as beneficial came out of that. So at the end of it, we were just where we were before the conversation started, and probably would have been better off had the conversation not been had. And so we're at a catch-22. And one of the things that first I'd like to apologize. I don't know if you saw the advertising that I created for this podcast, and you'll get to see it if you hang around till the close, and if you're watching the video version. And so I go on to explain the catch-22 circumstances from which there is no escape, and then I ask the question: are we at the point of no return? And what I'd like to apologize for is I don't try to use titillation as a way to get viewers. And I feel that comes across as titillating. What I'd like to do is try to find ways to get solutions and answers to problems and situations that we are dealing with. And titillation does not help. How we talk to each other is extremely important. And even that is taking a beating in this current environment. We use terms like left and right and conservative and some of the other terms, but we don't use them as a way to categorize or to identify a position. We use them as an instrument of a blunt instrument to beat up on the other person. So some people say on the left, they don't mean a left ideology. What they mean is those lefties. And it's not intended to identify people who have a more liberal view of liberal, another word. So if someone calls you a liberal, it's not intended to identify your politics. It's intended to label you so that someone who is a different view than you can get emotionally angry at you, and has nothing to do with trying to identify what answers or solutions that you're trying to provide. Or so our conversation about solutions has become extremely toxic, and that's not something you can't hear everywhere. Local news, national news, international news. And so as we try to beat up on each other, we move further and further away from each other of trying to find a solution. And one of the things that does not help the situation is that one side feels that any concessions is not doable. If you give an inch, we lose. And then the other side tries to use emotion to try to reach those people who are steadfast in their beliefs. And the more that they try to reach those people, the further back those people pull from the conversation, because that to them is a sign of weakness. So we're in a catch-22. Every attempt you make to reach out reflects that the other side is winning. And if the other side is winning, they have no incentive to try to reach out and reach some kind of consensus and give a little ground. We haven't even identified what is giving ground. We use terms like, we use labels like conservative and liberal. What does that mean? How many points of, how many ideas do you have to be considered liberal? How many ideas do you have to have? What are your ideas to have to be conservative? If you believe in, and we've just pro-life, you can't even say pro-life and say what that means. Some people say pro-life means anti-abortion, but some people say that pro-life doesn't mean anti-abortion. It means something else. And so we haven't, our language, how we talk to each other, should give ideas about the ideas that we're trying to put forth. What has happened is, no matter how you try to reach someone, the ideas that you are putting forth are then labeled or termed in such a way as to be attacking, and rather than searching for answers, so that we can find solutions to things that are occurring in our society so that we can move forward. We passed the tax cut bill, and that was as contentious as you can get. We haven't even defined how we know that it works. We put that into place without any kind of metrics to determine if it was going to be successful or not. we don't know if it can be successful. We have no way to measure it. What I've seen a lot, and it just may be the news that I've seen, but over the past week, there was Spike Lee used motherfucker and just language that you don't normally see in a public forum. There was the teacher who was gunned down in her driveway in front of her house because she was accused of having had relationships with a 17-year-old. And so I see that there's the growing frustration, the more toxic response to that. When she wasn't even judged by a jury to have been found guilty of anything. We're starting to ignore our legal system, the thing that I think was put into place to help us not be barbaric, to not just vigilante justice, to accuse someone of something and then hang them or enforce punishment on them without a fair trial, without understanding the circumstances. And I'm not saying that Spike Lee, I don't want to conflate the two, the teacher getting shot and Spike Lee's comments. They were to just show that we are becoming more aggressive in our public discourse, because those two items don't conflate together. They're totally different. One is probably more acceptable in a civilized manner. Yes, he may have used harsh words, but it is still words, and we can still come back from that, and we can still have a sane discussion. Killing the teacher, she can't come back from that. If there's some reason that was wrong, that was incorrect, that she did not do what she was accused of, it is a permanent final solution. And so the concern that I see is we've reached a point where we don't want to talk to each other. We want to talk at each other. We want to say what I believe is correct, and you should capitulate to that. So how do we get, does this have to run its course? Does this anger, does this frustration, does this badgering and beating each other have to run its course, or is this the new norm? For years, it was thought that, so there's a polite way to address things, and you can find a way to flip someone the bird verbally without using the F word. But that became a bad thing because it was called political correctness. That's a bad thing, to be politically correct. To not say something derogatory to someone's face is a bad thing. To respect someone's space is a bad thing. To respect someone's the person, to try to include everybody in the conversation. That's what political correctness was supposed to do. It was supposed to find a way to include everyone in the conversation. But somehow it has turned out to be a negative. It's a bad thing. So you don't want to be politically correct. You don't want to be seen as someone trying to include everyone else in the conversation. And that's where we used to be. We used to be trying to find ways to include everybody in the conversation. And that has become extremely difficult and extremely problematic. How do you include someone? How do two people talk when one side doesn't believe you should exist, and in that conversation, in that space? How do you have a conversation with someone who will openly call for your execution, or openly call for you to be hurt, harmed, or arrested, or to be mistreated, but yet they are still a part of the society? And so how do we address those? How we address those people is important. So in the course of doing this, we've tried to have a stabilizing figure in the president or in our leadership, for them to set precedent, to set the tone, to help shine a light on the way we should try to address each other. So what happened was, in this last election, we elected someone who didn't want that mantle, who did not want to set civility as the method of communication, but accomplish their goals through intimidation, through agitation, through confusion. But they are not the leader of that. They are actually the result of that. So how do we break out of when 50% of the country felt it was okay, that the ends justify the means, that it is not important how we get there, but that we go where I want to go? So my question on this one was, have we reached a point of no return? And I think it was a titillating question, so I'll rephrase it. How do we get to a point where we can start being better citizens to achieve more for everyone? I don't know if we have to run its course, or we have to just learn to adapt in this new environment, and harsh words and pushing and shoving and not listening to each other. And it's just all a matter of who has the most power that is going to win out in the end. I would like your input on that. What do you think? I think it just has to run its course. Hopefully it's a short course, but we do need to push back against it, and how we push back against it is going to be important. Shame does no longer seem to work. Appeals to emotion no longer seems to work. So what other tools do we have that logic doesn't even seem to work. because many people are using logic, using facts and figures that don't have any real truth behind them to make their point. And how do you have a reasonable discussion with someone who does not want to be reasonable? The difficulty is that no one person or no one group is always going to be right. So if you're not always right, then someone can look at what you're doing and say, you're no better than I am. You haven't accomplished anything better than I have because you're not honest, or you've made mistakes. And if you can make a mistake, then why not I can't make a mistake? And that's a fair argument. But if we don't have all of the same goals, if we don't find some point where we can relate to each other, then it's going to be difficult to ever come to a consensus as a group. I look forward to being back with you next week, and you can replay this video version of the podcast on YouTube. You can search for Lions Den STL on YouTube to find the channel. Now, the audio podcast is available on Stitcher.com, Podcast.com, the iTunes Store, and the Google Music Play Store, and recently added to Anchor.fm. The internet is powered by your likes and shares and comments, so please share and comment on this episode where you find it, and that's because it matters. Remember to be cool, be calm, and above all, be careful. Look out for the other guy, because they may not be looking out for you.